Yeah, it's the middle button.
Just to double check. Good to go? Yeah, awesome. Okay, so on Monday, November 17th, there was an attack in my neighborhood. So hi, I'm Sedona Greg, and today I want to talk to you about the dangers of our local coyotes. So as I said, November of last year, there was a coyote attack in my neighborhood. A 3-year-old was at the playground connected to it, and a coyote came over and bit the 3-year-old on the head. Luckily, the 3-year-old survived with only a 1-inch laceration, but unfortunately, the coyote did not. Local police searched around my neighborhood and ultimately euthanized it. So today I want to warn you about the dangers of local coyotes. I thought I would discuss this with you all because for the past couple of months, my parents, my neighbors, and myself, we have all been kind of afraid to go outside, and we fear for the safety of not only ourselves, but for our beloved cats and dogs and also children. I also felt that discussing this with you guys today would cause you all to be reasonably cautious as well, and maybe prepare you for the off chance that you're ever faced with a coyote. So today I'd like to warn you of the dangers of coyotes. I will discuss such topics relating to my main topic, such as why they're so predominant in our area, just how common attacks are, and what to do if you're ever faced with a coyote. Okay, so yeah, that was my neighborhood. That's the coyote. It's dead now, which is really sad. So first, let's find out why coyotes are so widespread in the Orange County. They are widespread in our specific area because the terrain and ecosystem suits them. According to the City of Cypress website, coyotes don't necessarily need wild and open spaces to survive in. Our residential and urban areas have fit them perfectly for generations, making it easy for easy access to food, water, and shelter. The animals and plant life that coyotes feed upon are also very abundant in our area. The Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife state that coyotes will feed off numerous small animals such as rats, mice, squirrels, rabbits, and any other kind of small rodent. The Washington Department also says that they will eat birds, fish, fruits, berries, and even snakes. However, these aren't the only items that coyotes will eat, and that's what's causing them to be such a problem. The Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife states that coyotes will also eat any sort of garbage, pet food, or pets that they can get their hands on. Because garbage and pets like dogs and cats are so common in our local neighborhoods, this makes them the perfect target for coyotes to feed off of, making them less inclined to be afraid and more inclined to stick around. So now that we know why they're amongst us, let's see just how common it is to have a dangerous run-in with a coyote. Martin Wiskell, a writer for the OC Register, wrote in an article he published last year that from the years 2012 to 2016, there were 50 instances of coyote attacks that were identified by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. In a related Orange County article written by Lauren Williams, a wildlife expert named Nyan Quinn states that there were more humans harmed by coyotes in the year 2015 than there had ever been in past years combined. The sickening truth about these attacks is that's not the most common victims are small children and animals. So as you can see, that's a small chihuahua that got bit on the hip. That's a little Shih Tzu looking thing that got bit right there, and also that's a guy that got beat up pretty bad. So in my neighborhood alone, there's been multiple instances of run-ins. In addition to the 3-year-old that was bitten on the head, a neighbor has complained that their cat was taken to be fed upon, and there's been multiple recounts of neighbors taking their dogs out on walks and being openly stalked and followed by coyotes. In other local areas, the OC Animal Care recalls an attack in Fullerton where an adult was bitten by a coyote just last year. In the early 80s, 3-year-old Kelly Keene was severely wounded by a coyote in Glendale, and she unfortunately succumbed to her injuries. Though her situation took place in the past in the 80s, it still should not be glossed over or forgotten. The reason coyotes are such a common culprit of attacks is because they have become less afraid and more comfortable. The City of Corona's official website explains that coyotes have a consistent source of food, like our neighborhoods with our local animals and garbage. They will lose all sense of caution and fear. This makes them more comfortable, and they start taking chances like openly stalking people walking their dogs and keeping their hungry eyes out for small children. Lastly, if there's anything I want to leave you with today, it is how to defend yourself if you're ever faced with a coyote. Coyotes are predators, so when something mimics a predator in prey sort of or like a prey sort of action, it makes them more aggressive and ready to hunt. This means you should never ever run from a coyote. It mimics what a prey would do, so therefore they become aggressive and they're on the prowl to hunt you. The best thing to do is to make loud noises and big motions. This makes you appear more dominant over the coyote. This can be done by waving your arms or screaming really loudly. My neighborhood council has recommended air horns like those, so we do have an air horn in my house, just a couple squirts of those. Scares them right off, hopefully. The OC Outdoors website teaches readers to throw rocks. This makes the coyotes a little bit more afraid and they flee so they don't get hit by a rock and they can save their own life. Don't leave any garbage, food, or animal carcasses easily accessible to any animals outside. This is unintentional feeding, so if you provide that sort of source for them to constantly come feed upon, they will become dependent on you and less afraid of everybody else. Avoid walking your dogs or letting them out during early dawn or dusk. This is usually when coyotes will come out and be more active in the neighborhood, so go ahead and just walk them in between those times. And with this knowledge, hopefully you guys can protect yourselves from coyotes. That's it. So today my goal was to warn you guys all about the dangers of our local coyotes, specifically in Orange County. I did this with explaining how prominent they are, gave some insight to how often attacks happen, and just what to happen if you guys are ever attacked or near one. So I hope you guys keep yourself safe. So yeah, that's it.
So Aaron, you here? What did you think?
So the beginning of the speech where your attention getter was like this suspenseful statement, it felt more like a clickbait title of an article rather than, it was very short. And, but it was interesting right after you introduced yourself. You showed why you cared about the situation because you explained that it's happening in your area, and in your preview, you mentioned 2 main points, but then you talked about 3 throughout your whole entire speech. I counted, I think you cited about like 5 or 6 sources, so that was good. The only last thing I have to say, I think, is the second slide. You had a map. You discussed 3 of the pictures, but you didn't discuss really what the map was for. And I found myself like staring at it. But overall, I think you organized it really well, and it was a good speech.
All right, I'm going to agree with a lot of things Aaron said. I think there is kind of a thing at the start that made it sound a little bit awkward when you got going. But you have a good attention device. It's you just kind of have this stop point at once in one situation, and then you come back and you go back into your story. You just want to go into the story. Go with the story and use that as your attention device. You don't need the title slide. Let's get rid of that kind of thing because that's not necessary, and it also reveals your subject before you really get a chance to talk about it and takes away some of that little bit of suspense that we're talking about. I thought that you did a very good job in the opening section justifying talking about the subject, giving us information about the number of attacks that have happened, that this has been an increasing issue that's going on, and the story also does the same sort of thing at the beginning. There's a very clear preview of what the supporting structure is going to be. I didn't have the problem that he said there were 2 things. I thought I heard 3, but it's we can always watch back and see. I didn't have the same issue. It could just have been something passed him by, or I heard something and gave you credit for it, and I thought, okay, well that made perfect sense. The content I thought was really nicely developed. There's a lot of supporting material there. You explain everything very clearly. I think there's good reason to talk about this, and there's audience interest because you talk about local examples, you talk about your own neighborhood, you talk about you've got an example of Fullerton that you mentioned, you talk about some other things that are going on in Southern California. The map thing I think also gets people involved a little bit. The structural stuff was pretty straightforward. It's mostly topical. There was one transition that was a little bit awkward, but otherwise everything was fine. The visual materials, I think, like I said, you don't need the title slide. Everything else I thought was pretty effective, except that there's one slide that you had with the neighborhood where the attack took place and then the coyote that ultimately was killed. That should have been in the introduction. Yeah, I kind of got the impression that that's what it was for, and that maybe you'd forgotten it. And so that, to me, that seems like if you didn't have the title slide and had stuck that in that spot, that would have worked really well and been more impressive. It wasn't a huge drawback, but it was just one of those little things. Probably practice fixes that kind of issue a little bit. And it's very nicely delivered. You do a good job speaking to the audience for the most part. You know the material, you know what it is that you want to say, and even though you do have some stuff, some quotes and some statistics that you're presenting, you usually keep those, when you refer to your own notes, it's very brief to have to do that. You really know what it is that you're trying to say about the subject, and I appreciated that. All right.